Start now.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's the flow?
Yeah.
So someone else was going to do something before me, wasn't there?
Yes.
Then I have some slides. Okay.
Yeah.
So
As per plan, we all know that today we have a slight change in our program. We are going to put one topic first that is out of our course. Kavita is going to present us about the hiring strategies in different organization, and I'm sure it's going to be very interesting and very helpful for us who are really dealing with this issue, like Tanu, myself, and some other guys. So after that, Juliette will be presenting our first topic, that is about big data and 4 V's of big data. And the third thing, Sumedh will be talking about the challenges of big data. So
okay.
it's over to Kavita. Please go
I'll
ahead.
just start with sharing my screen.
Yes, please.
I
Please
will have
share your
to
screen.
enable this.
It's already enabled.
Oh, it says, okay, great, thanks. Okay. There we go. Starting from that. Oops. Can you see the screen?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So, so hiring strategy, I think, see what has happened is conventional hiring methodologies have really undergone a lot of changes in this, especially in this COVID time. So all the predictions across the globe, world forums have been making that there will be a mass change in the skill set, that the way we are operating. So there's a data point I think it's worth considering. About 75 million jobs, and I don't mean jobs, but job skills, will be obsolete by the end of 2022. This data used to be end of 2025, which has been, thanks to COVID, become 2022. And there'll be an introduction to about 133 million new job roles, job skills by the end of 2022. So which means we are actually heading for talent war. So while we hear all the stories around unemployment and not getting people, but the right relevant people, it's going to be more and more increasingly difficult. So what are the new talent strategies, and how does the 2020 look like, or the changes that they've undergone is something which I've tried capturing. Typically, the talent acquisition is all around now. As you speak, it's all about recruiting, employer branding, which means we should be very actively branding our organization, whether we are hiring or not hiring. So this has to be a continuous process, and the whole candidate experience. What a candidate go through in terms of the hiring cycle, right from the time we contact a candidate to the time when either we make an offer or not make an offer. If we make an offer, then onboarding and so on, the journey continues. Even if we are rejecting a candidate, how the connection and the relationship should be.
Here, Kavita, I can't.
Sorry. Hi. Yeah. Sumedh, is that you?
Just lost you. Everyone else able to hear Kavita properly?
Am I audible?
Yes. Yes,
Yeah,
I can.
we are hearing.
Okay.
We are hearing.
Okay, maybe it's just me.
Okay. So what are the trends which are going viral? I'll just switch off my video so that, I mean, in case, I think it's so the few trends which are going viral, it's a concept of total talent. We'll talk about each one of them, but first one is the total talent concept, which means nowadays it's not important for you to hire everybody on roll permanent, with 60 years as a retirement. So the whole rise of gig economy and SME environment is something which is come into play in a big way, because now no more you have to come to office and work. That's not the only way. You could be virtually sitting anywhere in the world and yet working for that organization. There's a concept called recruitment marketing, and that's a constant thing. It's a new era where employers have to work very heavily on their branding so that they're able to attract the best of the talent. because talent these days are not working for money alone. It's not that you'll give me a CTC or a big fat paycheck and I'll join you. So there is a full concept of recruitment marketing, which we'll again touch upon. Age of analytics, we're going to touch upon AI, big data, and so on. Build versus buy model. Now, this is again a very important concept, keeping your talent pool strong. Diversity and inclusion. It has a new meaning in today's time. So what does total talent means? Total talent typically is your gig workers, which has taken over the world. We are already facing 5 generations working in a workplace. So there is already a generational differences, intergenerational movement happening. I hope we are all clear about the 5 generations which are working. It's typically the traditionalist, baby boomers, your Gen X, millennials, Gen Y. They're all working and they come with very different mindsets. Now, if you are dealing with a college MT versus a middle manager or a senior person who's in the system too, so these generational shifts have made the complications very high. We have to view talent holistically, which means when you're calculating your talent, it says that your total talent is typically the workforce made up of both permanent and contingent staff, which includes your contract, temporary, fixed hour basis working, or any kind of talent which is coming, because first and foremost is the mindset difference. Every time you need a person to be joining your team, you have to really question yourself, how long is the job in my organization? Is it a full-time job? Can somebody sitting anywhere in the world work with me? And then accordingly start working around it. There is also a very strong need for gig working designing to be done, which means branding them, attracting them at all point in time. So supposing you have, I can give an example, if you have a big contract coming in or you have a tender which has to go, now you're not sure if the tender will go or not go. Why should you hire a workforce? You can take a temporary workforce of gig workers who works with you for a set period. And once the tender goes through, you can actually then look at engaging them in a different way. So this workforce, which is temporary and a floating workforce, is something which we need to be continuously engaging. This also gives you the freedom of hiring a lot of subject matter experts, which means you have a particular challenge at a business level. The person comes in, sorts it out, and moves on. I can give you an example of media. We're going through a huge transition because we're moving from a linear TV, linear viewing, which we call as TV sets, linear platform, to multi-platform scenario where digitally people on the go, on the move, are connecting with news and so on. So we are very actively working on gig workforce, and as we speak, we are a very conventional, traditional company, media company, where when I joined, there were 1,300 people on roll, only permanent. There's no other workforce that we considered. There's a similar amount of workforce that I've hired in the last 1.5 years, which are completely floating workforce. And I like to call them floating. It's the same concept of gig. They come and go as and when you need them. So they may be working on multiple contracts. So for HR, it is your talent strategy in terms of saying that my wage cost permanently does not go out, yet I'm able to get enough hands and legs and best of the minds attached to me. So that's another change that has come in. There's a concept of recruitment marketing, which is very important. What we spoke about, especially the total talent, in case you want to have these gig working, best of the minds working with you and working on small projects. So they may be working with you on one project and maybe somebody else. So it's very important for you to be creating constant awareness of your brand. You have to be proactively ensuring that you're there in the market, engaging with them, having discussions even when you don't need people, so that proactively this pool is ready for you. It also requires a lot of focus around inbound recruitment strategy, which means proactively you're looking at continuously attracting talent. Now you may not immediately hire them, but it's about keeping a good relationship with them. Social media is playing a very important role. There's a very clear statistics that, on LinkedIn, about 36 people are the only active job seekers, whereas 90% of them only wants to hear about job opportunity. They're not looking out. But that's where your role comes in for recruitment marketing, so that you branding and you having a strong customer relationship management. Any questions so far? Am I going too fast?
No, I think it's fine.
Yeah.
Very good.
Fine from my side as well.
Good. Thanks. This is RPs, guys. Now, interestingly, the whole recruitment is moving to completely intelligence acquisition technology model. We used to initially have a lot of recruitment technology. I'm sure it's nothing new. It's been there for ages, but they were all ATS models. ATS models are basically, they are the tracking systems, candidate tracking systems. We moved from there to basically AI model, which means right from your sourcing tool to recruitment marketing to talent engagement platforms and automated scheduling through bots is all over. So we are actually doing everything online. Now in this, what happens is you collect so many data points that your AI system will continue keeping the engagement level for you. They will manage the sourcing for you. You may not have looked at such candidates. It can source from any pool, all your LinkedIn, whatever job sites are available. They continuously do that. So these softwares are available, these technologies are available, and there's a huge, heavy usage of predictive, descriptive. We face us, and the biggest biasness that we face is your unconscious biasness when you're hiring, especially through this. So I think there's this full data analytics that plays, big data that plays a big role, because predictive capabilities are something which both internally, externally are accessed. You'd not believe it's interesting, and that I'll touch upon more on the built model. There are 200 data points that one captures for an employee who's working in the organization, which means essentially from your shoe size to every damn thing in life is captured as a data point, and it is used to ensure that you drive enough engagement, succession planning, internal models of ensuring if there's a vacancy, first look internally, then externally. So all kind of job fits are worked around it. So it's a big usage of intelligence that we are doing.
So they have already started using Facebook, huh?
Sorry?
I said they have already started using Facebook data.
Yeah. Not just Facebook, it's much beyond. And I'm telling you, in HR, I've been talking to a lot of pals where I've been saying that GDRP, the General Data Protection Regulation, is more for the HR guys. Privacy has come big way. I mean, in India, it has come big way. I'm sure in every country other than EU, it's all over, because HR guys have maximum access to the data. And those regulations are very strictly to be followed. So build versus buy model is another one. What does that mean? It's like, simple terms, if you want to hire somebody, you always have an option of internally elevating a person, or going out, taking the exact talent match, go to your competition, pick the best guy, create disruption in competition, get that guy. That's a buy model. What we need to know for sure is if you have enough and more data points on your internal talent, and you're continuously in the grooming culture of internally moving them, build model is always stronger than the buy model. Because if you look at what is it that an employee wants, one of the biggest thing that comes in even before money is growth. So if you're able to give him that, it's always beneficial. I've just listed down few benefits of build and buy strategy. Both has advantage and disadvantages. Build strategy typically is all about talent developing, creates a culture of engagement. It also is something which creates momentum to key strategy. How I'll explain you is because the person who's internally will be somebody who has buy-ins, which means collaborating and creating buy-ins for his role is something which, because of the fact that he's been there for years, is easier. Also in the built model, the person is more loyal, more enthusiastic to give their best. Usually it's a success story which motivates a lot of other youngsters. So build strategy, while is very painful, time taking, there are no shortcuts, it's a very constant hand-holding method. And believe me, it can be really painstaking, but it is worth it. I can give you an example. When I was with Z, Z has 100 channels. It's one of the largest conglomerates in media, with channels in all genres. Very strongly, the sales team used to work on build model. We would only hire entry level people, and all the talent that we would hire was very strategically keeping in mind that are these talent for tomorrow, not hire today. Is the person capable of picking up higher roles and so on? So those were the basis on which the person was selected. Once the person was selected, they all knew that they will all internally grow. So all my leadership was clearly on the build strategy, which means they could work across channels, they could move across genres. The buy-ins were very high. The best part was we would have attrition only at the entry level, but the leadership stayed intact in spite of fierce competition in that area. And Z's sales team is one team which has always year on year delivered 200% of their targets. So that's something which we've seen as a magic, and I've been the HR head for that business. I can tell you there's nothing more wonderful than build model. But guys, it's very difficult to achieve, and it needs a lot of strategy from leaders. The business leaders have to own it up. By strategy, we all do all the time. It's very easy, fast. You want to hire for an exposition, map the competition, pick the best guy, get the right skill set matched, and the guy is on board. Igor, what are you doing? You screened it up. I mean, you put lines all over my screen. It also means that there could be higher momentum in terms of saying that, the percentage of, there's always a cultural fight in a buy model that happens. It's always that, the old people versus new people. These are few of the challenges. While from a business point of view, if a manager is smart, they're able to strategically align it. But whether we like it or not, if it's a tenured organization, buy models always is high risk. It has that built-in buy that comes in. I mean, new versus old that comes in. Are we clear on the strategy, build versus buy?
Excellent. It's very clear. Normally we are using only buy one. We don't use build.
Yes, very clear.
Yeah, but the powerful one is build, guys. If you're able to really go on a build model, they are your long-term pillars. They will see, Mustafa, many times, and we've discussed it offline also, where commitment becomes a challenge, ownership becomes a challenge. If you were to internally promote a guy, believe you me, that person will spend day and night to ensure that, he does it, because it's a trust that you've given him, and they usually don't fail you. Build models are very powerful.
But tell me one thing, sorry, Dhirendra here. When you are looking to follow the build model, so who is responsible for it? Like where the responsibility lies?
Fantastic, good question. See, build model is always a collaborative hiring. It cannot be an HR's decision. Collaborative hiring very clearly meaning business and HR has to do it together. Today, what is a C-suite's job? C-suite means all your chief officers, the C-suite should know their talent and nurture their talent as they do fundraising. I mean, it's as fundamental as that. Today, for any organization, there are only two P&Ls. One is your finance, which is your profit and loss statement that defines you, balance sheet. And second is your people metrics. The stronger talent pool you have, that's your biggest competition edge rather than the product, because all that is an outcome. So it's typically the business and the HR who has to drive this.
See,
and
sorry. Yeah, please continue, finish.
Please continue, I'll wait, no worries.
Yeah, so
sorry.
this build model gets built over a period of time, and it's a continuous process. This also means that you need to have a very strong succession planning process in place, which I mean, I'll be happy to, if you want to take a session on it, because again, in 2020, the whole framework of succession planning has changed. That is a model that strengthens your build strategy.
See, generally what we see in the industry, that, okay, everyone want to work with, like they want motivated people, committed staff, work for them day and night. But when the staff comes to them for a growth, say career growth or the financial growth, so there is very little to offer in the company. They may, means like if the staff leaves, they may come back and they may hire a person on a higher salary, but they will not give a growth to the existing staff.
See,
And that
this is
happens in most of the organizations. So
how painstaking is it? Think of it from a company point of view. What is the loss? Your wage cost goes up. Your hiring cost is higher. You have to culturally struggle to get that person fit, because all those people who knows that we've worked maybe 5 years, 10 years, and this new guy who's come in is paid more,
yeah.
people are not going to cooperate with him. There's going to be heartburns. That guy is going to be a lone ranger and so on. It's not his fault.
It's like a kind of demotivation to the existing staff as well. The person who have left, he have already left, so he's no more there. But the existing staff, they see like, okay, the old guy who was working was not given any raise, and the new staff have come on a higher pay, and then like, okay, others are also demotivated, and they also start looking towards the door, and it's like a kind of a exit competition starts in the company, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And wait, if it's something like, I can give you my example. If it's a media where there are maybe 5, 7 big players, competition enters in a new market, and suddenly your people are double and triple being offered, then it's
Yeah.
So it's very important for the company to have a very robust build strategy and communicate it back. Now imagine a situation if you were to know that you are on one of the fast track growth and you want to be in the succession plan for the future role. Would you not do your best to not only improve yourself, but also your commitment level goes up, because there's a career path. 3 years down the line, I'm going to be an X, maybe X+1 or X+2. So once we have a career path, then it becomes so much more easier. The commitment levels are so much higher. See, these are basics which, your hiring strategy has to lay it down clearly. Once that is done, the path is very easy. But
Clearly, I agree with you.
Sorry.
But the thing is that the basics are right in very few places, right?
Darinder, I think we have 2 more guys wants to ask. One, Tajuddin, he has a question, and then Tanu also wants.
Yeah,
yes,
please go ahead.
So please, Tajuddin, go ahead.
Yeah. So my contribution or question, as the case may be, is can we run each of these strategy in isolation of another? Can we run strictly a build strategy in isolation of a buy strategy, or can we have a mixture of the two? That's number one. Secondly, on the example that you cited, my current bank, I left them at some point. I left for 2.5 years, and the new management took over, and they asked me to come back. So I came back on higher pay, higher grade. Yes, I knew, even to me as an employee, I knew the danger in that, because there are some people I left on the same grade, and I will now be supervising them, on higher pay, higher grade, and what have you. I knew there might be some resentment. There might be some, negative vibes from them towards me. So all I had to do was, I lower my guard. I showed humility. I didn't impose myself on them to show them that, oh, I'm the new kid on the block or something. So I moderated that to a large extent. I did that for the first 6 months. I wasn't fussy in my ideas, in my suggestions at meetings and what have you. So generally with that, they felt comfortable with me, and we pick up from there. But can we run this good strategy in isolation of each other? Thank you.
So, good question, Tajuddin. It's not in isolation, let me tell you. It doesn't work like that. Build strategy can take over 60 to 70%. It's a good number if you ask me. 60 to 70% hiring if it is done through and it has to be over a period of time. Like I'll tell you, I've done 3 cycles of build strategy in an organization. My year 1 goal, I took that 40% of my hirings for all key roles will be done through build strategy, and 60% I'll go with the buy model. Year 2, my KRA, I took the second thing of saying it will be 50-50. And year 3, before I exited, it was 70-30. So it is always gradual. It is always over a period of time. Year 1 and year 2 are the most difficult one. Usually people give up because there's so many internal challenges. If the frameworks are not right, people say that it's easier to go and hire. If I have a vacancy, I have a 21-day TAT, I can just pick up somebody, offer and come. You know, it's so much more easier. So build strategy has to be very carefully crafted. That is what I mean. And it will always work in percentage, because an organization, if it's a startup, then then anyway you have to go for a buy strategy. If it's a tenured organization, you will, if you're introducing a concept of build strategy, you will have to do it gradually.
Anu, please go ahead.
Yeah.
The questions?
Thank you very much. Thank you, Kavita, for sharing a wonderful thought, and it's kind of echo what we usually do. Talent development is a combination responsibility. It's not only HR or business. It's a entire organizations they are responsible. Having said that, I mean, I would like to again go back to your earlier point, and probably in the last question you have already answered that it always build strategy is not right. That is for sure, because it has to be a combination of build and buy strategy. Why? Because you need some talent also, probably you need some specific skill set which is probably not available within that organization. At that time you are dependent on buy model, where you have to go and pick up the best talent available, so that at least that complement your current system. This is one part. Second part, I think to Dhirender's point also, what I personally believe is, yes, there are few organizations, they are not involved, they really don't take care of the talent in a way they're supposed to be. That's the reason there is a high attrition and it goes on. So in simple word, I mean, I would say it's depend on the industry. It varies from industry to industry. It varies from aspiration of the organizations versus, what phase of life, what life cycle of that particular organization, and so on and so forth. So it's not nothing is very perfect. It has to be a combination of both build and buy strategy. And I really like the last statement what you made, like over a period of time, you're building a build strategy. So maybe third year would be a little higher side versus buying. So that would be my comment here.
Yeah, we have question from Sumedh as well. Sumedh, please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. I don't really have a question, Kavita. I just wanted to appreciate the information that you're sharing. I think you already can guess everyone is very interested in knowing more. So is there any way we can get some literature, get some advice from you, how to learn about these strategies? And of course, there must be other things apart from build and buy strategy that you would want to share with us. It would help everyone, I think, in the group.
Sure. Anytime. I'm always available. That's something which we can do. And as I said, to understand build strategy better, I think it will be important if we can have succession planning as a session. I mean, because again, in 2020, that whole concept has gone through a big change. And as I said, it's a continuous process. A lot more can come in. There are multiple things that comes into play, actually. I always believe that as HR professionals, we are dealing with gray because human beings are all gray. There is no black and white that we deal with.
So, I have a question. It is similar question or it is counter question to Dhirinder. I just want to know that if a company has a good candidate and who can fulfill the requirement and he is capable enough, why company will not promote him while they will be hiring a new guy and spending a lot of money for hiring process and then putting with the higher pay and putting him on top of that. So my point of view is might be it could be an understanding of the guy himself that I am capable enough. Management is not looking at him that he is capable enough.
Absolutely.
So what do you think about this?
So Mustafa, good question again. See, what happens is it's usually company, in absence of any concrete data around an employee, is not able to identify the talent. Now, I may be working as an X level, company understands me at that X level only. So I may be working as manager hiring or manager sales. My company only understands that I have done this. This is my background. Maybe I'm capable of only that. They never map my aspiration. They never mapped what I'm capable of, what are the skill sets required for the next job, and trained me in that line. Maybe I personally trained myself. Again, that's something which is absent. In absence of a engagement platform where these things are completely brought out, and that is what the whole talent management strategy says. You know, in absence of a data point, usually companies go ahead and hire people, and then what happens is that one rock star who was ready for that role usually ends up resigning, you know, and we lose that talent also. So we get a new guy at maybe double the price, because always hiring cost, replacement cost is more than the existing employee's salary. That's a universal law. So you pay more, get a person, and you also lose a person who was probably ready for that role. So I usually say these are all classic talent blunders that we do in the companies. Needless to say, the amount of heart burns that it creates. It just brings the productive cycle back.
We have one more
Kavita,
question
Mustafa,
from
if I can
Abir.
just add one more point here on this continuation of this statement.
Please.
So it's again very much boils down to what Mustafa I'm planning. Maybe just in subsequent couple of weeks time I'll do that coaching. So it's all about what you are trying to say is self-awareness. What I know about myself versus what others know about myself. So this is how you do.
Absolutely.
So there's a beautiful model called Johari window. Maybe
Johari,
just you can
yes.
find in the Google, which is all about your self-awareness. And as a coach, you are exploring or you are mining the potential of that guy. So probably he has the real potential, but probably he's not been explored because of a variety of reasons. And that is how this awareness level create that. So maybe Johari Undo, you can just refer in the Google, you can find that. It's a very good research done in Harvard long ago. So
Johari is
very
also
good
good for
read.
your own self-development and understanding.
So can you just, Tanu, please put it in the chat, and we will take the question from Abir. Abir, please go ahead.
I have slides on Johari. I can mail it to the group.
Please.
It'll be, I mean, you can actually go through it.
That would be helpful, really helpful.
Absolutely. So just a last point, and then I'll hand over the stage to Janet. Is the next one, right? So diversity and inclusion.
Juliette.
Juliette, sorry.
Yes, Juliette. Yes, thank you.
I think
Can I
Abir
have
has
one
a question. Please, Abir,
Yes,
go
thank
ahead.
you. Thank you very much. Kavita, whatever you have tackled is fundamentally crucial, and thank you for that. You provided us with phenomenal inputs. I would like to ask about something a bit more complicated. Most of what you have said are very solid, concrete concepts. Nonetheless, there are factors that are playing roles within the day-to-day business that are less concrete, more of soft and visible factors. When it comes to political factors, even with the presence of talents, okay, but there might be those kind of human tendency, political factors playing a role in the, promotion or identification. Other things, not being able to detect the talents from leaders, or let's talk about maybe baby boomers or different background of mindsets. Do you think these factors are playing major role in your experience?
Absolutely. I mean, it's, as I said, dealing with gray is all about playing with, the biasness of human minds. So absolutely, that's a universal challenge that every HR leader or a business leader will face. But I think I always believe fundamentally that if you have a very strong framework and practices for anything you're doing, if you have your strategies right, say if it is hiring strategy or your talent strategy or your diversity inclusion strategy, if you have your strategies in place, your processes are aligned, you will be able to overcome these biases or mitigate them to a certain extent. Now, depends on how strong your processes are wired or your framework is, you are able to at least weed off 70 to 80% biases. 20% will still remain. I mean, you'll be very lucky if it is not there, but that biasness will still remain. We are human. I mean, it's very natural for our biasness to crop in. And that is why I always say the hiring has to be a collaborative process. You need to sit with at least there should be an interview panel, because multiple views about one candidate or one person, you're getting them in your family of, organization as a family. I largely believe you must have buy-ins of multiple stakeholders. So even if you're doing a sales interview, I always say, why would you not make an editorial guy or a marketing guy sit in the panel so that you get the views, and when 3-4 minds come in, you're able to get a better in-depth understanding of a person. So the collaborative hiring model always works when you.
Thank you very much. Well put.
On diversity and inclusion, typically, while there's lots been said, diversity is all about going beyond gender today. It is not just getting male-female ratios right in the organization. It is also going in terms of hiring diverse work pool, also be it, country, background. I would say even in my company, I am one of the flag bearers where I'm trying to get transgenders and LGBT in my organization to do some specific roles and so on, helping them train, collaborate. So diversity has actually gone to that level. Creating inclusion, inclusion is because you're already facing these 5 generations, as I'm saying. There's a huge generational shift happening. So it's the mindsets that need to be, brought in, the cultures that needs to be aligned, creating more collaborative workspace where, you consistently try to remove the biasness. It's a continuous journey, and that is something we all need to be working towards if you want this to be successful. Towards the end, I would want to close it with this: hire character, train skill, because skills are trainable, guys. That's it from my.
Thank you, Kavita. It's really nice, and we really want these kind of topics to come, and we want to learn from each other's experience. Now we have Juliette. She's going to share her presentation, and we'll move on to our original topics.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mustafa. Thank you, Kavita. Wonderful presentation. And now I will just share my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So I would like to talk now about introduction to big data. We'll talk about volume, variety, velocity, and veracity. So I'm Juliette Anstis, and I'm here in the in UK. So the agenda for today, again, talk about introduction to big data, and I'd also like to talk about working with big data and my experiences of working with big data. And then we'll go through in each of the the 4 V's, that's again, the volume, variety, velocity, and veracity. And then we'll finish off with questions and answers. And then I'll hand back to Mustafa, where then we'll talk about the challenges of big data. So what is big data? Well, of course, we have the volume really is the size of the big data. And from my experience, I've had a career in working in some of the very largest multinationals in the world moving big data. So I can assure you the size of the data is enormous, and we'll talk about in more detail in a second. We're also about the variety of data. That means the type of data. There's enormous amounts of different types of data out there. Again, we'll talk about that. And then we will talk about the velocity, as in that is the speed in which the data can be analyzed and the decisions are made. And then the veracity, really, that is the truthfulness, if you like, of the data. How true is that data? As in, is it obsolete and defunct, or is it, the true picture of reality of what's going on in your business? The opportunities from big data, there are an enormous amount of opportunities out there and an enormous amount of values to business. But that's why you'll find there's certainly I'd found in the last 5 years or so, there's been a big push in the multinationals to join the data together, to be able to see a global view of your data. Because once you've tidied up your data across the estate, whether or not it's just within your own country or globally or within your own continent or just Europe, then you can see that data. It's then tidy and you can drill down. And once you have your data in an organized state, then it is potentially of huge value to your business. Now, you can see there's some large tech companies. We'll just talk of a few and how they have used their data so effectively. So if we talk about, I know when we were on our course last term, we talked about Uber. Well, of course, this is the largest taxi company in the world, but they have they don't have taxis. They just use other people's cars. And also Facebook, that's the largest media company, but they don't own any content. It's everybody else's content. They just manage, and they have the data so carefully organized that, and that enables other people to put their data on Facebook. And of course, their revenue is from the advertising that sits with that. And you also have Google and Apple with their the largest app store, but they themselves don't make any apps. They just make other apps available. So when you have a look at these very large multinational companies, not just large multinationals, that just happens to be my space in my career, but even in the smaller companies, there is a difference between the physical infrastructure and the digital infrastructure. So physical infrastructure, we talk about buildings, we talk about overheads, big, enormous buildings in London filled with 400 or so thousands of people. But that's very, very different to their digital infrastructure. And it is the digital infrastructure that is so important for big data. That is, for example, where is your data? What is your data? How is it structured? Can you access it? How quick is it? And how relevant it is. And it goes back to those 4 V's, you know, of that data. What is the size of that data? What is the type of data? Have we got that, you know, we understand the different types, and how quickly can our business access that data and use their data? And then how good, truthful indeed this data is, or is it really terribly obsolete? So that's really an introduction to the big data. And I would like to just spend a minute or two talking about, say, my experience in big data, and start with the first one that I have chosen, which is the Global Finance Transformation Program that I did at GlaxoSmithKline. Now, GlaxoSmithKline is a world-leading, as we know, pharmaceutical company, one of the largest companies in the world, making pharmaceutical drugs. They at the time were doing a merger with Novartis, another enormous pharmaceutical company. And we needed to, and my role was to direct this transformation. We needed to gather all of the data that we had worldwide, that's in 155 countries, and pull them together into one central database. It sounds simple. It was not simple. We did it in 18 months, and we did it in 12 waves, and each wave had sort of 8 to 10 countries at any one time. We had to do an awful lot of legacy systems had to go, and we put in some software called SAP S/4HANA for the manufacturing, and with all the business intelligence reporting on the top. The most important thing that we did on that program is we took the data that was all over the place, quite frankly. It was in so many thousands of different databases. We brought them all into one central database in an ordered way, so that it was all relational. And then we put over the top a business intelligence layer. And the point of that is, I know GlaxoSmithKline has a very big physical presence. It has very lovely offices all over the world, and many people working for them. But their physical infrastructure was needed improving, so that for 2 reasons. One, so that people could access the data quickly, and secondly, for financial reporting, so that any company on the stock market, in the FTSE 100, those companies, because of the standards, what is called the IFRS 9 at the time, it's now 27, but those international finance reporting standards, that's what those are. They means that the companies in the top 100 need to report out their finances in the same format, which meant complications for these multinationals. They needed to get their finances tidy so that they could do such a thing.
Juliette, I have a question here. How big it was, this database? What was the size in terabytes or in any?
Well, I've got some data. When we get to size, we'll see the data, and I'll refer back to that slide. So we'll talk about the size in a minute, and that's interesting. So I'll take that question along with me, and I'll bring that up when we talk about the size. But thank you for talking that through. But we'll bring that up. Then again, I talk about the BP contract that I was working. Again, BP is a very large, as we know, oil and gas energy company. And we were making a central hub for the finances so that we could take the finances from each of the countries, bring them into the UK into some central hub, report out. We traded on that money at JP Morgan overnight. And then from that hub, we put the money, we send the money back out to those countries. So we could report globally of the financial position, our cash position at any one time, which if we think about was terribly difficult, but that company alone had 640 billion turnover. So that's an awful lot of rows of data to make sure you know where they are and account for them and find, if you like, any missing millions or wherever that may have fallen through. So in the process at BP, we had around 3,500 different bank accounts. We reduced that to about 6 different bank accounts, and we had over 500 different legacy systems. Again, we removed all of those and had just that one legacy system. So that program rather that I directed took nearly 2 years to do. We were working again with an enormous amount of data, and we'll talk about that again in the size. And then one last one I'll talk about, which was the transformation of HSBC Bank, again a global bank. Again, I was director for that, and we had mergers of different other banks that we had to bring in. So we had to collate all of the different finances from those other banks into that one merger into HSBC Bank. So the enormous amount of data being managed, if you like. So if you're into big data, those are the sorts of programs that we were working with. So let's just now talk about Mustafa's question, which was about the volume, about how big is big. So just in gigabytes of data in 2020, 43 trillion gigabytes of data was created in 2020. That's how big the world was using in 2020, and 6 billion or so people had cell phones, and 2.5 billion images are on the internet. That's how much we're dealing with. I mean, in the size of the companies that we were dealing with, it's not billions of gigabytes, it's trillions of gigabytes in these multinationals. Not quite 43. That's the whole of the year, but hitting 1 trillion gigabytes of data in these multinationals. So it's not just how big is big, but it's also the physical volume of data. We have to really think about where that data is going to be stored. There are 7 major cloud data centers in the world. Philippines, for example, is one. We have one in Europe. So these 7 or so cloud, they are absolutely vast to store this volume of data, and the companies, more and more companies are moving towards the cloud to store their big data in those data warehouses. Now I could talk for weeks on the complexity of high volume of data. It's like anything. If even in a house, if you have a lot of things, you've got to have order. You've got to say, okay, all the kitchen equipment goes in the kitchen, and all the sofas go in the sitting room, etc., etc. So you have to be very tidy. You have to plan in advance what we call a solution architect. That is the diagram of where we're going to store the data. Different sorts of data needs to be archived. So you don't always need that at any one time. You can archive data, but quite often for regulatory purposes, you need to be able to have access to the last 7 years of finance data. And if you are going to archive data, you don't always need to archive absolutely every data. And again, we'll talk about the different types of data in a second. The advantages of high volume data is actually, one of the advantages is that you have got data to compare and contrast and to analyze, and the more data you've got on a subject, generally anywhere in the world, the more data you've got, the more accurate your predictions, the more accurate your analysis, and the more accurate your reporting can be, because you have data to compare to. So you can have lots of lovely fun on trend analysis, for example, and market appreciations over time. But on the other hand, on the downside, is you may have an enormous amount of images. I mean, I know as in a family here, we've got an enormous amount of photographs on, just as a family, a small family. We might want to keep them all, but we don't really want to see them all every day. We don't want to really even necessarily look at them every year, but we want to keep them. And we do that with data. We have to decide, what data do we need every day? What do we need once a year? What might we need, and what will we never need again? And it's important also with the never need again to make sure that if we need to delete it, then we delete it. So we don't hold on to everything. So variety, this is, if you like, that this means the different types of data that's available. And we just selected a few for the screen. You've got video, you've got tweets, Google searches, images, all the business data, all the voice, the text, and the email traffic. And I think as we become more and more connected, and you can see that even this year, the businesses are becoming more connected, and even meetings are now video, and they're being recorded, and everything is more connected. Then the variety of data is increasing, and the size of the data is increasing. So velocity, if we remind ourselves what velocity means, that's the speed, of course. So in the case of the 4 V's of big data, velocity is the speed in which data is analyzed, and therefore any decisions that are then made. So as we talked earlier, it's very important that we are able to access certain data, the key data, the really big important data, quickly. Doctors need to see patient details quickly. So we need to make sure that when you're building these systems, when you're managing big data, that the velocity of access of that data is different for the different types of data. Not necessarily types of data, but just, archive data. It doesn't matter if we have to wait overnight to get it. We're good with that. But doctors need to see the report straight away. The second point there is to analyze data and use algorithms to make decisions. Now, more and more people really are now, the number of people who analyze the data is decreasing, but the number of algorithms that decide what is happening is increasing. So we're using these algorithms much more now than we were, say, a few years ago, and using those to make the decisions. Of course, you can only really do that if you've got very large data and all your data is organized, and you've got good algorithms. So you need a combination of all of those things. An example there is the Wall Street traders. So the number of people who analyze the data is decreasing, and the number of algorithms that decide whether traders will buy or sell their shares at a particular time is increasing. So that's an example really of how things are. And a lot of work now, and I've really felt it in the last 12 months, is the building of these algorithms. They've become more important in businesses, and a lot of focus is going into those algorithms, and then the artificial intelligence that sits surrounding that. Then we move on to veracity, and really that is how truthful is your data at any one time. It might have been truthful last year, but it isn't necessarily truthful now. So to achieve veracity, the data must reflect the truth. It must be accurate and reliable and dependable. That's what we're aiming for with the big data. And that's why it's so important when I talked about earlier about when with big data, you start to, when you're moving big data and building these systems that are really some of the biggest in the world, you've really got to design it terribly carefully, that all the data goes in certain rooms, in tables, if you like, in the database, and that the access layer on top of that is we've thought about whether or not then that data needs to be updated continually or maybe just archived. So I will hand over in a minute to challenges of big data, but I just had a few things that are on my mind just to finish off about challenges of big data. And I'll just keep this slide small because there's a whole section on that coming up. But really, you know, when I think about the challenges of data of the programs that I have directed, I have to think about, is this big data useful data? I often say that to customers. Do you really, really, really need it? And sometimes I say, definitely not, or we might, you know. So how useful is it? And is your big data still compliant? Because you can't just keep loads and loads of data that is not compliant. That you can't bring it back if it's now, if the compliance rules have changed. You need to make sure your data is relevant to the new compliance. Can users still access your big data? It's all very well storing everything in some data center in the Philippines, but can you actually get it, you know, when you need it? And is your big data out of date? Well, unfortunately, it does get out of date very quickly, and that's just how it is. But you need to be clear what state your data's in, and how much data should be stored, and how much is redundant. Well, that's a very big question, because storing data is expensive. And should you keep your data for data mining reporting? As I said earlier, the more data you've got, the better your data mining reporting is. It's because you've got data to drill down back into, as long as, of course, that your data is at the point in time accurate. And so that's the end of my slide. So I just open it out to you all if there's any questions.
Yeah, Juliette, you remember that during this third week study, we were having a question, which V is most impactable when it comes to volume, variety, velocity, and
Yes.
veracity.
Yes.
So what is your point of view on that?
Well, I think speed, well, it's speed or veracity. I mean, people can wait for data. They can wait. So it's not, maybe it's not the speed, because people can wait. The type of data, well, you know, there is lots of different types of data. The size of the data, you know, we have technologies around the size of data to cope with it. So I think it must be the veracity, the truthfulness of the data, because nobody wants to, at the end of the day, you want the answer. So you want it as near as possible. You can wait for it. And it doesn't really matter always if it's necessary in a graph or a video or a piece of text. Just get, you know, we'll put up with that, but let's at least have the truth. So my answer to that question would be veracity.
Anyone has any question, please?
Absolutely agree with you, Juliette. Very nicely done. One thought around while we say that all fours are important and so on, in your experience, especially with Smith Beecham that you mentioned, or any other company that you work for, is really that volume really used all the time, or we end up really collecting it?
In our case, it was used to do the tidying up. You know, whether or not they use it in BAU, which is business as usual, is another matter. But certainly with regards to putting in an implementation, sure, we had to touch every row of data that was in that company. And also we needed to work that out. We needed to work out what data we don't really need and put that away tidy in a drawer. Not a drawer exactly, but you get what I mean. And then what are they going to be doing every day, and making sure that they could access what they need quickly, and the data that they don't need so quickly, that can just be secured and archived.
Great, thanks. Guys, I will have to excuse myself. I'll join the Wednesday session again. Sumedh is making the second one, right? The presentation.
Yeah.
Will I be able to catch up with Sumedh on Wednesday?
No, Wednesday we have,
maybe not.
Sumedh.
Maybe not, but I've shared my presentation in the group chat, and happy to take questions whenever you feel.
I am going to trouble you on that, Sumedh. I was really
That's
looking
okay.
forward to, but I have a very pressing.
No problem.
I need to move on. So thank you, guys. Thank you so much. Thank you, Juliette.
Pleasure.
Sumedh, I'm missing this one, but we'll trouble you with the follow-up questions once I have the.
Anytime.
Thank you.
So thank you all. Have a nice week ahead.
Bye.
Thank you, Juliette,
Thanks,
for your
Kavita.
presentation. And
Okay.
we'll move on. And I think
I will stop
Sumedh-
sharing now.
Yeah. So Sumedh will share his presentation. Go ahead, please, Sumedh.
Great. So we're talking about big data. I think Juliette has already covered all the interesting bits. I've got just a couple of topics to cover within big data. So first of all, we're looking at the challenges, or what can go wrong when we are dealing with big data. All these points Juliette has already covered. I'm just going to reiterate. You probably can have unidentified data that is not relevant to you. You can't relate to the data field. Sorry for the typing mistake over there. Second was non-compliant. So as Juliette said, if it's non-compliant, you can't really use it, or rather you shouldn't even have that data with you. Data can be inaccessible. You might have the data, but if you haven't put the right access layer on top of it, your staff or your team will not be able to use that data. Next is redundancy. Data can be duplicated. It can be redundant. It can be useless. It can get obsolete very quickly, as Juliette said. It will be out of date, or it can have trivial details which are not useful at all. Couple of things that I wanted to everyone to note. This is what one of the professors mentioned in the modules that we went through. Only 14% of corporate data on an average is useful data. So 86% of the data that everyone collects is probably not going to be used. So if you're looking at big data, you can probably think of it as the condensed 14% of all the data that would have been collected on the internet in that year or by that company. Again, storage costs. So as again, something that Juliette covered, it costs a lot of money to store data. So this is something we, as an organization, we will have to look into. I'm talking about Google Cloud Vision next. So this is, we've all read about neural networks, and so the Google Cloud Vision is one of the types of neural networks, and this particular tool falls under the category of a convoluted or a convolutional neural network. What this basically does is, if everyone can just picture the decision tree in their mind. So the decision tree runs in layers. You have the first decision, the answer is yes and no, and then you move on to the next layer, and then you answer yes and no, and then you move on accordingly. So a convoluted neural network pretty much works on that principle. There are layers to the neural network. You answer yes or no to the first layer, and the network will then push you on to the next layer. Again, you'll go through some questions, and again, you keep on going through down the layer, and ultimately you arrive at a place where the error rate is 0%, and that means that you've got your correct answer. So the Google Cloud Vision is an image detection ML tool. It can detect entities in an image and classify it into various categories. The network understands the patterns of the pixels to arrive at a possible solution, deploys error filters, challenge its arrived solution and repeats the process. So this is basically what a neural network, or rather even a decision tree, does to some extent. You go through different layers and you keep on going depending on the data scientist's curiosity. If he's put down a lot of layers, then you'll have to go through a lot of layers, and ultimately the error rate will be very, very small. Training a vision ML network requires millions of subjects in varying lighting, angles, etc. So if you're planning to run your own image sensing software, it's probably not going to be worthwhile. It's not going to be feasible. In fact, you'll have to put down a lot of money. You'll have to train your neural network through millions, probably millions of pictures of one particular subject in different angles, different lighting techniques, so that the computer can understand what this subject can look like in various different situations. The benefit of Google Cloud Vision is that it's made this ML tool available to everyone, and you can use this tool through their API. I think it's free to use. I'm not sure, but we'll have to check if Google charges anything for the API. What can be the use cases? So these are the use cases which I can think about. I'm sure all of you would probably have some other answers to this as well. I think stock photo websites, they would probably be using this for indexing all the images that they have on their database. Also, maybe if you're web crawling and collecting images on a particular subject, for example, if I'm investigating Osama bin Laden, I would want to find out all pictures related to Osama bin Laden. I will have my software, I will have to train my machine learning tool to identify Laden in various different lighting situations, different haircuts. So I'll have to give him a lot of filters. And so maybe this is one of the use cases I could come up with. And the last one is space and satellite imaging projects. Agencies in and around the across the world probably will also be analyzing machine learning tools. Great. This is just the last bit of my presentation. Guess the correlation. This was just a quick exercise to make us understand how correlation can be visualized in a pictorial format. This was the only thing to pick up from here was that correlation and causation might not always be the same. What that means is, in summers, you probably you tend to eat more ice creams, but also in summers, there tends to be more forest fires. This does not mean that eating more ice creams leads to more forest fires. So there is no direct correlation. There is direct correlation between eating ice creams and forest fires, but there is no causation. So we have to understand the shortcomings of correlation also. At the same time, I think this was a fun exercise to do, guessthecorrelation.com. Interesting thing I found about this website was created by a Cambridge University student. Probably he was one of the professor's students himself. And what that person is basically trying to collect data and understand how people understand correlation. Does an average person understand how can correlation be visualized? So I think interesting tool, but not something that you would be using in your business management day-to-day routine. Great, that's it. Thanks, guys.
Sumedh, can you just give one more example, general thing about this, guess the correlation?
So guess the correlation was just a quick game designed by a PhD student. He wanted people to understand what correlation is and how to visualize what correlation would look like on a graph. If you want to understand guess the correlation, another example could be, so again, I'm going to go back to the same example. In the months of summer, you eat a lot of ice creams. There are a lot of forest fires. At the same time, a lot of people die from drowning because everyone goes to swimming. So this does not mean that eating ice creams leads to deaths by drowning. or also in the months of summer, a lot of people shed a lot of weight. This does not mean that eating ice cream leads to loss of weight. There is correlation. If statistically you follow the trend, you would definitely be able to see that more consumption of ice creams running parallel to more number of deaths due to drowning and more number of forest fires. But all your decisions should not be based only on correlation. There should always be causation also. There should always be a reason behind the correlation.
Great, great. Guys, anyone has any question to Sumedh or any other question that any one of us can answer? So I think no question.
All good.
Yeah.
All good.
Yeah. So thank you, Sumedh. Thank you, everyone. We will be conducting the similar session again on Wednesday, same time. The topic for the discussion, big data and the challenges will be the same, but we will be having a new topic of the dimensions of strategy for the organizations. So it will be covered by Arnado, who is our colleague from Philippines. I think he is vice president in one of the companies. So he would be covering the dimensions of strategy. So I would request everyone to join us again on Wednesday, and thank you all.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot.
Guys. Bye-bye.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, guys. It's a great
Bye-bye.
session. Thank you very much.
Great session.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.